We want to bring in former CIA Director James Woolsey right now. Sir, good to have you on the program. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good to be with you, Maria.
What do you make of what Vladimir Putin is saying right now? He's on stage at a conference in Russia being asked about Russia's meddling. He said Russia had nothing to do with any meddling in the U.S. election.
Well, Russia is never not meddling in the politics of its neighbors and other countries. Basically, they have something they call disinformation, disinformatia, which is essentially official lying, and they are terrible about this. They're resolute. They do it all the time. And what's happened is that cyber has opened up the United States to this. They used to just do it in European countries where it was easy for them to get printers in to Photoshop photographs and things like that. They don't need to do that in the cyber world. They can operate from where they are.
Right.
And that, any time a senior Russian, Mr. Putin or anyone else, says they are not interfering in the electoral processes of democratic countries, you know he's lying because his lips are moving.
But because his lips are moving. But that's nothing new, right? I mean, we've known that Russia has been spying on us. We're spying on them. They're trying to meddle.
It's not just a matter of spying. It's a matter of trying to interfere with the processes. Now, they may have tried and failed or not tried too hard to get the vote to go one direction or another. The thing we have to worry about is that 25% of American voting machines do not have any paper backup. So at our next election, some 18 months or so from now, we will, for 25% of the voting machines, we won't be able to do a recount because it'll only be in there electronically, and anything electronic may well have been tampered with by cyber.
Wow. Here's James Friedman from the Journal.
Director, hi. Wondering what you think the agenda was here for Putin. Obviously, candidate Trump and President Trump's policies are big negatives for Russia in terms of more U.S. energy production, lower oil prices, etc. Do you think the game here was they were just trying to undercut who they expected to be the next president, Hillary Clinton?
It's hard to say. They want to make sure they can have what effect they want on Western countries, and particularly us, regardless of who might win or lose an election. I think that we've been altogether far too naive about dealing with the Russians on this kind of thing, and it's time to take the gloves off.
It's Dagan McDowell. In terms of the U.S. relationship with Russia going forward from here, the Wall Street Journal has a front-page story today that what was seen as a potentially rapid rapprochement with Russia has basically been kicked to the back burner, that the White House has pushed off the Kremlin's proposals for a meeting with Vladimir Putin, and they're increasingly skeptical of any kind of grand bargain with Moscow. So where does that leave us, say, in the next almost 4 years?
I think it was George Orwell who said you can always live in peace if you are willing to live with a boot in your face. And we can get along with the Russians by going along with them. We're just giving in the same way Obama did. For example, when he declared the red line in Syria and then said, whoops, I don't really mean it here, let's give it to the Russians to deal with. That gets you in a situation in which you can get along very well with the Russians at the expense of the people of Syria, and right now Ukraine is probably what they would like to grab most of all.
Let me switch gears, ask you about FBI Director James Comey. Reportedly, he wanted to write an op-ed about the Bureau's findings, and those findings were that Russia wanted to meddle into the election. He wanted to release that information months before the election in an op-ed, but the Obama administration officials nixed the idea. Why would they not want him to come out and say what he found?
I don't know, but public officials do write op-eds. This particular FBI director is taking public stances a lot more than FBI directors usually do, but on several things. But I think that would have been a reasonable op-ed for an FBI director to write, to call people's attention to the fact that the Russians have branched out and they're not just trying to interfere the way they used to, but rather are using cyber to interfere with us.
I guess what I'm getting at is we keep seeing this investigation going on around Russia, and what we're hearing today in terms of Russia meddling, in terms of Russia trying to do whatever it wants, wherever it wants around the world, is nothing new. So what about this idea of potential collusion between the Trump administration and the Russians? This investigation keeps looking at this, and there's no evidence whatsoever of any collusion. Is this a whole waste of time that is impacting the president's agenda when we know what the American people want, and that is job creation and tax reform?
I don't know. Look, it's very hard to make judgments about sensitive investigations with a little bit of knowledge here and a little bit of knowledge there. I was general counsel for 3 years of the Senate Armed Services Committee back in the 70s. And I ran these sorts of investigations. And it is relatively easy, if you have a limited number of people involved, to keep your confidence and to get your job done. And here's something will leak and there's something will leak, but it doesn't mean that we have a whole new picture or a different picture on what's taking place. I think it's important for the Congress to be able to run their investigations in a reasonable way and and hold on to things as tightly as they possibly can, thwarting the press, yes, temporarily at least, until they put out a report.
But in terms of those leaks, is the intelligence community, I'm not sure which agency, or the fact that the Obama administration opened up the opportunity to share information at the end of its term, I mean, is this undermining the president?
Sharing information is a one-by-one process. We, back at the end of the 60s, decided to start working with China in order to thwart a possible Russian attempt to move against China militarily. We worked closely with China on all sorts of very sensitive intelligence for some years. I don't know that it's still going on, but it was for several years back in the 70s. And so sharing information is a major policy decision, should be, usually by the president of a country or at the very least the head of the intelligence service. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you have thrown everything into the kettle and you're going to do whatever the other country says or wants. But sharing information is something that is done between countries, even ones that have very different philosophies, such as us and China in the 70s.